things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever is clean, she's a sneaky hider. I realize any alibis. Oh, what a sinner is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner is it in her? Just illusion, manifestation, or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Don't you wish that your weekend was longer than just 2 days? Well, if so, then you're in luck, because here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio, our weekend begins on Wednesday. Yes, you heard that right. Our weekend kicks off every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, with DarkWolf's Den, starring yours truly, Jerry the Dark Wolf. But that's where the fun has only just begun. Make sure you come back every Thursday through Sunday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, for the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show, starring AJ the Rippin' Rabbit. He dives into the archives of vocal legend Art Bell and brings those stories up to date. So make sure that you spend your extended weekends with the animals of radio, Jerry the Dark Wolf and AJ the Rippin' Rabbit, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, every Wednesday through Sunday, right here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio.
Rippin' Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Rippin' Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson with Reality Shifters and the International Mandela Effect Conference, and you're now listening to DarkWolf's Den Show on Rippin' Common Sense Radio.
Is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light, and you're now listening to DarkWolf's Den.
Are ghosts real?
We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the 6th branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave, hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness, this is the DarkWolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to another episode of the DarkWolf's Den Show. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, the edge of your seat, or anywhere in between, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. That's right. It is Spooktober 15, 2020, and tonight on the DarkWolf's Den Show, we're ruining childhoods. That's right. All those fairy tales you grew up with, those sweet, pretty princess tales that you enjoyed so much, they actually had very dark origins. The real stories are much, much worse than the fairy tales. All that and more tonight on the DarkWolf's Den Show for Spooktober 15th. But first, today in history. Thank you, Dark Wolf. Hey, DW, don't you love it when the Today in History lines up with the actual topic we're talking about, right? Check this one out. I got one for you, bud. Today in 1952, a book by E.B. White, illustrated by Garth Williams and published by Harper's and Brothers, a story about a pig and a spider that worked together to save the pig's life, and in the story they actually talk to each other, kind of like in a fairy tale, right? Right, Dark Wolf? Right, yeah, exactly. So, this story is, if you guys haven't guessed it already, Charlotte's Web, ladies and gentlemen, published today in 1952, and that is today's Today in History. Thank you, Jerry. And you're right, I do love it when the fact of the day lines up with the topic that we have, because this is quite a scary, dark topic indeed. We're gonna ruin many childhoods tonight, aren't we, Jerry? Oh, you have no idea, ladies and gentlemen. You're right, DW. We are indeed gonna ruin many a childhood tonight, but at least we can try to have fun all along the way, and if nothing else, apply a little common sense, right? Oh, you bet we are. We're gonna have a blast tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, like I said, is Spooktober 15, 2020. And when we were growing up, there were many stories like Charlotte's Web and many more stories that we grew up with that were supposed to be cute little fairy tales. Tales to teach us morals and lessons, right? That's what you thought. But those fairy tales, the original tales actually, are much, much more creepy and scary. And, for lack of better terms, dark. But before we get into the fairy tales, we're gonna start with the things that we hear the earliest in our lives. Those nursery rhymes that we hear when we're really, really young. Well, you'd be surprised the dark origins behind them. Time to start ruining some childhoods from the very beginning.
Children often sing the cute nursery rhymes they learn, but nowadays the true meaning behind them gets lost.
Not only does the meaning get lost, it gets turned into a children's fairy tale, a rhyme, a simple song for a child to sing. But as you'll soon find out, these are meant for anything but children.
Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, and Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't but Humpty together again. Nowhere in the rhyme did they say Humpty Dumpty was an egg.
Of course, growing up, when we're shown the book, we're shown an egg sitting on a wall, right? But nowhere does it say that Humpty Dumpty was an egg at all, although that is the first thing that comes to mind, right? Actually, Humpty Dumpty was...
I would love to leave it like that, but digging deeper, it actually is believed that Humpty Dumpty was a large cannon used in the English Civil War. It was placed high on a wall, but when that wall was damaged, Humpty fell. And none of the king's horses and none of the king's men could pull him back up to be used again, because of how large and heavy he was.
That's right, it was a cannon the whole time. A cannon that had fallen off the wall, and no matter what they done, they couldn't get it back on top to fire again. So Humpty Dumpty falling off a wall, the fun little song we used to sing, is actually the song about a piece of war equipment during a war. How childlike is that?
3 blind mice. 3 blind mice, 3 blind mice. See how they run, see how they run. They all ran after the farmer's wife, who cut off their tails with a carving knife. Did you ever see such a thing in your life as 3 blind mice?
And of course one would think, well, it must be the mice getting their tails cut off that is the dark part of this, right? Oh, you'd be very, very wrong, my friend. Wait, you mean it gets worse? Oh, yes, Jerry. It gets much, much worse from here.
The 3 blind mice were actually 3 noblemen in the 1500s, back when there was a queen known as Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary was strictly Catholic and would do everything in her power to execute and punish anyone who did not convert to Catholicism.
Thus the name Bloody Mary.
These mice were plotting against the queen, and thus were punished. But they were not dismembered, nor even blinded as the rhyme goes, but they were burnt at the stake for their crimes against the crown.
So of course, when we hear this fairy tale, we picture 3 mice running around that can't see. Running around all silly-like, but it turns out that this is actually based on something much, much darker. And again, this is what we sing as kids, as children's nursery rhymes. It makes you wonder who was in charge of coming up with these nursery rhymes, huh? Well, actually, nursery rhymes... Jerry, that was meant for the audience, not you. Hold on. We'll get another question for you in just a moment. Oh, sorry, DW. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, on to our next creepy nursery rhyme. I tell you what, you sure do know how to pick some creepy topics, Dark Wolf. Thank you.
Mary, Mary, quite contrary. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? With silver bells and cockle shells, and pretty maids all in a row.
And for the nursery rhymes, I would say this is probably the worst and the nastiest one on the entire list. I must warn you, listener discretion is advised.
Again, Queen Bloody Mary Tudor, known for killing and punishing Protestants. In this rhyme, her garden refers to her ever-growing graveyards of Protestant martyrs. The silver bells and cockle shells are instruments of torture she would have used upon them before they would actually be killed.
As we go, you'll find that each line actually has a very interestingly dark meaning.
Silver bells were thumbscrews used to crush the victim's thumbs between a hard surface, screwing it down tighter and tighter until it was nothing.
Could you imagine having your thumb screwed down to a table all the way down until your thumb is completely nothing and the screw is all the way through it? Ooh, how painful that even sounds even today. Ugh.
The cockle shells were attached to the genitalia.
That sounds incredibly painful, wouldn't you say, Jerry? Jerry, you okay, Jerry? You look a little rough over there. I'm not entirely sure. That sounds so painful. I can only imagine. Gosh, does that hurt just to think about. Oh my goodness. Then stop thinking about it. You're the one that brought it up. So it's got to get better then. Tell me the maids in a row isn't also something like really dark and horrible, right? Are you kidding? Those are the worst part of the entire thing.
The maids in this rhyme doesn't refer to actual maids, but the guillotine, which was nicknamed the Maiden and shortened to the Maid.
That's right, the guillotines, that's what the maids in a row are. Told you it was the worst part. But let me tell you, it's not as easy a process as you would think. You know how we all see a guillotine work on TV? Well, here's a little known fact you may never have heard before. Why do I get the distinct feeling that this is going to be something even worse than the last time? Because it is.
Did you know the original guillotine didn't actually work as quickly as the movies make it out? And that it could take up to 11 strikes before the head would actually separate from the body.
11 strikes? I would hate to have front row seats to that event. Blood is really hard to get out of this fur. But what an interesting fact nonetheless, right? As we see in TV, it just takes one strike and the head goes rolling off like a bowling ball. But in reality, it was nowhere near like that. I bet that public event took a little while longer than planned, right? Could you imagine if it was a person with big bones, big strong bones? Probably 30 or 40 whacks, right, with a guillotine? Oh, how painful that would be, because remember, you're still alive while this is going on.
Peter, Peter, Pumpkin Eater. Peter, Peter, Pumpkin Eater had a wife and couldn't keep her. He put her in a pumpkin shell, and there he kept her very well.
Well, on the surface, that doesn't sound too very bad.
When you first hear this, you simply think that he just hides his wife in a pumpkin shell. But looking into the words more carefully, Peter's wife was a loose woman. He couldn't keep her. so he killed her and placed her into a pumpkin shell. And there he kept her, never to run off again.
Wow, that brings a very much darker tone to that nursery rhyme, doesn't it? It amazes me the darkness that we start out telling our kids when they enter this world.
Rain, rain, go away.
And this one here is one that even us adults find ourselves repeating quite often.
Rain, rain, go away. Come again another day. Little Johnny wants to play. Rain, rain, go to Spain. Never show your face again.
I have to say, until I heard this version, I had never heard of Go to Spain. But that actually has a good dark meaning also.
Today's version has the ending going, come again another day. But the reason the original has go to Spain, never show your face again, is because the stormy weather helped the English defeat the Spanish Armada. The English were doomed to fail with their smaller army, but during that storm, only 10,000 men of their whole Spanish Armada made it back to Spain.
And this time the story is actually about a war. As the second time war has crept up in these nursery rhymes.
Ring around the rosy.
Just think we haven't even gotten to the fairy tales yet. But a lot of you may have heard of the Ring Around the Rosie. This may actually be one that you know why it's so dark.
This is a very simple nursery rhyme. Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down.
One would think you cannot construe such short poems to something so dark and horrid. But yet, as we're going to find out if you don't know already, this one is one of the darkest of them all.
The Black Death brought clear symptoms. A rosy red rash in the shape of a ring, and when you caught it, you reeked of death. So one would put herbs, flowers, posies in your pockets to keep the smell away. And when it finally caught you, ashes. You were cremated the best they could during that time. We all fall down. No one survived. It was a guaranteed death sentence.
So a nursery rhyme that nonetheless school kids made a game out of is actually from the bubonic plague and the death surrounding what would happen if you caught the plague. How dark is that?
Ba Black Sheep.
How you holding up over there, Jerry?
Disturbed. Very, very disturbed. This is really ruining my childhood. You realize that, right? I used to love every one of these childhood songs. I grew up with all of them. How could you do this? This is so evil.
It's not evil, it's dark, and I am the Dark Wolf. Besides, this was your idea.
I've really got to quit telling you my ideas.
Ba Black Sheep.
Ba Black Sheep, have you any wool? Yes sir, 3 bags full. 1 for the master, 1 for the dame, and 1 for the little boy who lives down the lane.
Okay, surely this one can't be that bad.
Yes, on the surface it doesn't sound very bad at all, does it? But as we'll soon find, it too is quite dark.
The line, and 1 for the little boy who lives down the lane, originally ended as, and none for the little boy who cries down the lane. Now this one is cute, and one may think that everything is well, but actually it's about the rising taxes in the 13th century, and how it was being split. 1/3 went to the crown, another to the church, and then the rest for the farmer. But for the shepherd boy, he got nothing. And as for the black sheep, back then, black sheeps were bad luck and useless because their wool could not be dyed.
So this is more of a political one than anything. Not necessarily dark, but dark just the same, considering the fact that it's a children's rhyme and it's about politics.
Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after.
Now, admittedly, on the surface, this is already kind of disturbing, right? Go up a hill to fetch a pail of water, fall down, break your head, come rolling down the hill. It's already dark. And would you know that that's only the beginning of the darkness? The meaning is so much worse.
Up got Jack, and home did Trot, as fast as he could caper. He went to bed and bound his head with vinegar and brown paper.
Hey, DW, have you ever heard the second part of that rhyme before?
No, I gotta say that part is a new one on me, too. Let's find out if its meaning is just as dark as the first half of it.
This one has some speculation. It has been connected with the beheadings of King Louis XVI of France, who lost his crown, Jack. And once after, Jill, his queen, Marie Antoinette, came tumbling soon after him. Though their ending was changed to please the children and keep such a horrible fate from them.
And this one happens to be about a fallen kingship. Again, I don't know what that second half was about. Again, a fallen kingship, I'm sure, but I've never heard the second half of that poem. How about you guys? Have you guys heard of that before?
Ladybird, ladybird, fly away home. Ladybird, ladybird, fly away home. Your house is on fire and your children are gone. All except for one called Anne, for she has crept under the frying pan.
Alright, Dark Wolf, this is already a dark one on the surface. How can you make this one even darker? There's no way.
Oh, you think it's dark on the surface? Wait till you hear the meaning.
Ladybird, also known as ladybugs, is a Catholic in the 16th century England when it was a Protestant country. Catholics were forced to attend Protestant masses and were not allowed to practice their own faith, or they were charged hefty fines. They would have to meet in secret, often outdoors in fields. This is also where the ladybirds were often found.
Okay, see, Dark Wolf? I mean, it's not good to have your faith suppressed, but it's not that bad, right? That's not as dark as some of them on this list, right?
Oh, it's not over yet. Remember the part about the fire?
The fire refers to the priests who were burned at the stakes for not giving up their faith.
Ah, come on!
I told you it gets darker.
Goosey, goosey gander. Goosey, goosey gander, whither dost thou wander? Upstairs and downstairs, and here in the lady's chamber. There I met an old man who would say his prayers. I took him by the leg and threw him down the stairs.
Even I gotta admit this one is pretty darn violent, even just on the surface.
This refers to the time when Catholic priests would have to stay in hiding. When families would harbor them, they would be taking a huge risk in doing so. If they were caught reciting their prayers in anything but English, which was the Protestant way, they were persecuted. As in Catholicism, prayers are recited in Latin.
And yet again, we have a child's nursery rhyme that actually relates to a very dark suppression of a religion. Just think about these the next time you're singing one of these childhood nursery rhymes. What did you think, Jerry? How did you like those nursery rhymes?
I gotta say, I don't know if I'm intrigued or disturbed, because I've learned a lot already, and we haven't even gotten to the fairy tales yet, but what I have learned has been incredibly darkly disturbing.
Why, thank you, because we're only getting started. Like you said, we haven't gotten to the best part, and yet here we are. And ladies and gentlemen, if you thought the nursery rhymes were dark, that's only the beginning. That's just scratching the surface of the darkness that we're now about to dive into in this deeply dark rabbit hole of fairy tales and truth behind them. One incredibly innocent fairy tale, at least one that we think to be innocent, is the Little Red Riding Hood. But Little Red Riding Hood actually is very, very dark indeed, depending upon which telling you're listening to.
So I get some interesting looks when I tell people that I teach courses and I do research on fairy tales. And those looks seem to be asking, why would someone study fairy tales? And my answer is because they're quite literally everywhere. We find them in the books we read our children at night, in the movie theater, on television, in ads for washing machines, and in Halloween costumes from Target.
Our culture, of course, is absolutely saturated with fairy tales.
Because fairy tales seem to be everywhere, they feel so familiar to us, like we really know them. And yet,
we even make up phrases like a fairy tale ending when something goes really, really right? I'm sure you used that phrase more than once, right, Jerry? A fairy tale ending.
Yeah, that's kind of what I hope for at the end of every show, right? A really good ending, a fairy tale ending, right?
Okay, that's maybe not quite what I meant, but yes, like that. Like a fairy tale ending, like a really good ending to the show. Don't worry, folks, the show is not ending here just yet. We're only just barely getting started.
We make a lot of assumptions about fairy tales. We assume that fairy tales have happy endings, handsome princes, and beautiful but passive princesses. We assume we know what is supposed to happen in a particular tale. So Little Red Riding Hood is saved by the woodsman, Beast overcomes his rival Gaston, and Cinderella finds her glass slipper and marries a prince.
See, those all had happy endings, right?
But learning about the history of fairy tales is truly a game changer.
Those happy endings Jerry just mentioned were only added on for the kids' sake, actually. They actually had different endings. Check this out.
It reveals aspects of tales that completely transform our understanding of them. We learn, for instance, that fairy tales are not innocent tales for children, that in fact, they often weren't written for children at all.
Well, that makes much more sense if they weren't actually meant for children. Did you know that, Jerry? Did you know that fairy tales weren't actually for children at all?
No, I can't say I did, DW. I always knew fairy tales to be just that, something we told our kids, and our kids kind of played out, like Cinderella, or as we're talking about here, Little Red Riding Hood. Those were always supposed to be for children, right? That's what I was taught growing up.
Yes, you were right, because that is what I remembered too growing up, is that fairy tales were kids' tales, just child's play, right? Actually, no, they were never ever meant to be for children. They were actually meant to be for a very specific group of adults.
Fairy tales can speak to a range of issues in different social and historical contexts. Traces of a tale's history are often still present in contemporary adaptations in film, television, and advertisement. And becoming aware of those traces and that history can elicit aha moments when we suddenly come to understand a familiar tale in new ways.
Once again, just like last night, I must give fair warning to those listeners who may have a weak stomach or a weak constitution. I warn you, this will get very dark and very, very disturbing very quickly. Listener discretion is advised. You have been warned.
Yes, like DW said, the topics we're about to cover actually are about to get very, very sensitive.
That's what I just said.
I love teaching about fairy tales because I often hear students saying things like, I will never watch a Disney film in the same way again. So in order to give you a sense of what I mean, let's take the example of the familiar tale of Little Red Riding Hood. The earliest written version of the tale that we know of, for the most part, is familiar to us. A little girl in a red riding hood goes to her grandmother's house, and she goes through the woods, and when she's in the woods, she encounters the wolf.
Was that you, DW? Was that you in the woods that she encountered?
Ha ha ha, don't be silly. I'm not that old yet. However, it might have been one of my ancestors.
And then the wolf races to grandmother's house, gobbles her up, and then he waits in bed for the little girl.
So far, this story sounds familiar.
The girl comes to grandmother's, and she goes inside, and she crawls into bed with the wolf.
So that's a new part of the telling. I don't remember her crawling into the bed with a wolf in the telling that I grew up with. What about you, Jerry? Do you remember her crawling in bed with a wolf?
No, in the telling that I remember, she just stood on the edge of the bed and said, "Oh my, what big this and what big that you have," which we'll probably get to that part here in just a second. I don't know the older version, so we'll see. But, you know, this one's dark on the surface too, DW, because the wolf runs home and gobbles up the grandmother and dresses in the grandmother's clothes. So, I mean, in the beginning, it's already dark. The wolf literally eats the grandmother, right?
Yes. Once again, we see darkness on the surface of the story, so we can only imagine the darkness that lies beneath.
And she starts saying, "Oh, grandmother, what big arms you have. What big legs you have. What big whatever you have." And then the wolf gobbles her up. Unfortunately, in this earliest written version of Little Red Riding Hood, no woodsman comes to save the day.
Not only does the wolf eat the grandmother, but he also gobbles up Little Red Riding Hood at the end of this tale. Once again, if it's this dark on the surface, wait till we get to the actual meaning.
Not many people realize that this earliest written version of Little Red Riding Hood was penned by Charles Perrault in 17th century France for an adult audience of aristocrats.
That's right. Remember earlier we discussed that it wasn't actually written for children, but it was written for a very specific group of people. That would be the 17th century French aristocrats, a powerful group of people. I guess you would say those that are what we call the elites today. But in 17th century France, there were certain things that you just could not say out loud, but if you could put it into a story form, you could actually get your point across much, much more easily.
Perrault was a very important man in the age of Louis XIV. He had important positions in the government, and he told fairy tales. And so Perrault and other female and male aristocrats would hang out in French salons, and they would all tell each other fairy tales. And one of the tales Perrault presented to his aristocratic listeners and readers was Little Red Riding Hood. So we have to imagine Perrault telling the story to an elite group of women and men in a luxuriously decorated aristocratic home. At the end of the tale, Perrault appends a moral to the story, which in fact recontextualizes the tale for such an audience.
So this goes from just being a cute little story about a little girl going to grandmother's house. It actually has a deep moral meaning to it.
And it reads as follows. We see here that young children, especially young well-bred ladies, should not listen to any sort of person. It isn't strange that a wolf eats so many of them up. I say wolf, for not all wolves are of the same kind. Some are of a comely humor, who follow young ladies into their homes, into their salons. But alas, who does not know that these smooth-talking wolves are the most dangerous wolves of all?
Smooth-talking wolf, she must be talking about me. Don't flatter yourself, DW. You're nowhere near as smooth as a 17th century Frenchman. Oui, but I can sure try to be. DW? Yes? Don't ever do that again.
So prose moral makes the wolf into a smooth-talking aristocrat who follows young ladies into salons to devour them, which we could understand in terms of seduction.
And of course, seduction being put in the place of devouring here definitely does change the meaning entirely and makes it a lot less disturbing, right, DW? Yes, I was a little worried it was going to go down the road of cannibalism for a minute. Thank God it didn't do that, right? Right?
In fact, some scholars have argued that this is a story about rape, given the violence of the tale.
Come on. I think I would have better been the cannibalism at this point. But again, DW, this is a very serious topic, right? And what better way to breach it with a group of 17th century snooty aristocrats, of course, than to put it in more of a moral story form that hopefully they would understand it just a little bit better, right?
In the 17th century French incarnation of Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf clearly is a male seducer who roams around French salons ready to pounce on unsuspecting young ladies. It is an allegorical tale about seduction or rape, and those connotations can play out in very suggestive ways in different media.
And like she mentioned a moment ago, in the media we find a lot of these references back to these fairy tales, references that we kind of wonder why they're put into that reference, right? Like Little Red Riding Hood. A lot of times in media, she's not presented as exactly the most wholesome of characters, right?
Little Red Riding Hood is often sexualized, which could suggest that she brought the tragedy upon herself.
Once again, this could only be what the media is suggesting when they use it in this fashion.
Taking a familiar tale and displacing it into an unfamiliar context highlights certain aspects of the tale that we might also find in other versions. So let's look at another version of the Little Red Riding Hood tale, a very different one.
And it's interesting how tales like these get passed down in different forms through the centuries, right?
The folklorist Paul de Leroux published an oral folk tale collected from peasants in rural France in the 19th century, nearly 150 years after Perrault published his version of the tale, and de Leroux called it the story of grandmother. So in this version of the tale, a mother sends her daughter off to her grandmother's house with a loaf of bread and a bottle of milk. So the girl goes to her grandmother's house, and she's in the woods, and she encounters the wolf. And in this version, the wolf says, he asks her, will you be taking the path of the pins or the path of the needles?
And once again, this part of the telling is a new one on me. I've never heard of the path of the pins and needles. How about you, Jerry? Have you ever heard of that part of the story? No, the paths of the pins and needles is definitely new to me too. But man, would that not be a rough path to walk, right? No matter which side you choose, that's gonna hurt. Well, I'm sure that the pins and needles must be symbolic. Goodness, I hope so. I also hope Little Red Riding Hood was wearing shoes.
And the girl says the path of the needles. So the wolf races to grandmother's house, and as we might expect, he kills her. But what's a little strange in this version is he takes her body and he cuts it up a little bit, and he puts some of her flesh in the pantry, and he puts some of her blood in a bottle.
Hey, DW, remember that cannibalism you were talking about earlier?
You have got to be kidding me.
When the girl arrives, the wolf disguises his grandmother, has her come in the house, and the wolf says, "Why don't you eat some of the meat in the pantry and drink some of the wine from the bottle?" So the girl unknowingly eats and drinks her grandmother. Then the wolf tells her to take off all of her clothes, throw them into the fire, and crawl into bed with him.
Wow, this one is dark even by my standards.
The girl does so, and then she starts saying, "Oh, Granny, how hairy you are." But before the wolf can devour her, the girl says, "I have to relieve myself." So the wolf ties a rope around her ankle, lets her go outside, and the girl goes outside, takes the rope, ties it around a tree, and flees and runs to her grandmother's house before the wolf can catch her. So the cannibalism of grandmother is a bit surprising in this version, but let's keep in mind, the tale was told in the context of Catholic rural France. The scene could be playing on Catholic Eucharistic ritual in which bread and wine are transubstantiated into the body and blood of Christ, which believers consume.
Okay, so now we find that the cannibalism actually is a reference to the Catholic traditions of taking in the body and the blood of Christ in reference to grandmother's blood and body. Now that is a little less disturbing, right?
And that incorporation is something that brings strength. So it could be precisely because the girl ingests her grandmother that she's able to outwit and outmaneuver the wolf. She quite literally incorporates her grandmother's strength and wisdom.
And interestingly enough, this plays on last night's episode with vampirism and how taking in the blood of one may actually, at least the belief is, that it may actually increase the strength or wisdom of the person. And yet here we find this again in what should be a tame child's fairy tale. Yet we're finding that even the most tame fairy tales have a very dark side to them.
If we go back to the scene where she's in the woods and has to choose between the path of the pins and the path of the needles, these are the tools of the peasant woman. So her choice of needles, her ingestion of grandmother, and her outwitting of the wolf could all be read in terms of a girl's initiation into womanhood.
And as we see here, DW, there can be many different interpretations of the same tale.
Still a dark way to tell such a simple thing.
So this version of the tale focuses on female initiation and even empowerment, rather than the successful seduction by a male aristocrat of a clueless young lady, as is the case of Perrault's tale. So these two very similar tales communicate two very different messages, but the theme of seduction remains a thread in both versions. This is a perfect example of how knowing the history of a tale completely transforms our understanding of it.
And now I understand that we're telling our kids a tale about seduction and darn near a mistreatment of women on one level, yet we're talking about the empowerment of women on another level. I know one thing. It is disturbingly confusing. But what I am really confused about is how these become children's tales, because we don't explain these meanings when we tell them to our children. We tell them to our children as if they're different types of stories altogether, and some grow their whole lives never knowing the actual dark truths behind these tales.
The wolf as predator takes new form in the film Freeway, with Kiefer Sutherland playing the role of Bob Wolverton.
That's right. This is repeated across many, many different forms of media, sometimes in ways that you might not realize the story that you are actually looking at.
He's a school counselor and serial killer of women who uses his counseling skills to lure in his prey, much like the smooth-talking aristocrat of Perrault's tale. But like the wily young girl of the story of Grandmother, the Little Red Riding Hood character Vanessa, played by Reese Witherspoon, is able to overcome her abuser. While viewers might recognize the Little Red Riding Hood motifs in the film, being familiar with these other earlier versions of the tale enhances our appreciation of the film and gets us to realize that each version communicates somewhat different messages, at the same time that they all play on our expectations and knowledge of the story. There's something enticing and exciting about discovering new meaning in a familiar tale, almost like discovering a new side to an old friend. Surprise, joy, astonishment, even disgust are some of the emotions different versions of tales elicit when I talk about their history. A beauty who quite literally sleeps with a filthy pig, birds who peck out the eyes of Cinderella's stepsisters, or a Cinderella who saves the day. Welcome to my wonderful world of fairy tales, and may you never understand Little Red Riding Hood in the same way again. Thank you.
And thank you, Miss Ann Duggan, for that extremely interesting look at Little Red Riding Hood. You have definitely opened my eyes to something that I will not ever look at the same again. So what do you think, Jerry? Are we disturbed enough yet, or should we keep going with even more dark truths behind these fairy tales?
You mean there are more fairy tales that are just as dark?
Oh no, not fairy tales to get that dark. Fairy tales to get much, much darker than that. Because in the second half, that's exactly what we have. We have fairy tales coming up that are going to disturb you much more than you ever thought possible. We've got the stories behind the stories in the second half of the DarkWolf's Den Show. And we're going to go ahead and take a network break right here because it looks like we've reached almost the entire hour round. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back with the second half of the DarkWolf's Den Show after these messages. Don't you touch that dial.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Sex in the city? Nope. Interview with a vampire? Nope. If you build it, they will come? Febreze? Tweeze in the middle? Wrong again. Depends. Nope. Welcome to the Twilight Zone, my friends. A phenomenon known as the Mandela effect. You may have heard of it. You may want to not neglect. Unbecoming, awake, and spiritually inclined. So sit back, relax, while I blow your mind. Take the thumb off the cell, stop following the sheep. Down the rabbit hole we go. Are you ready for that leap? The Zapruder film, #JFK. I looked at the footage and I said, what the heck? How come there are 6 people in that dang car? Stretch limo, for me, this was all too bizarre. A glass behind the driver, no way, Jose. I remember before in the car, my mind was in total disarray. Trying to make sense of what I was seeing, what I was witnessing. Didn't connect with my inner being. A second woman in the car for me was only the first lady. Do you smell what the rock is cooking? All this seemed kinda shady. Berenstein Bears. Nope. Shazam? Sinbad? Not in this reality. Good lord. An awakening. Was it all a revelation? The naysayers and skeptics call it confabulation. They say you misremembered and call us bat crazy. Did you smoke a doobie? Maybe that's why it's a little bit hazy. Unless you experience it, you'll never know. But enough of that, on with this Mandela effect flow. Mandela effect in the house. What did the world happen to Ed McMahon? In this reality, Publishers Clearinghouse was not a fan. Never the spokesperson, but we remember it clear as day. McMahon holding that check while the winner yelled out, "Yay!" American Family Publishers, never heard of them until now. This Mandela effect has me raising the people's eyebrow. So many theories on what it could be. Have you ever heard of CERN and the LHC? Luke, I am your father. Nope. Sally Fields? Nope, wrong again. That stands for the Large Hadron Collider. I thought I would mention. You know, the machine that opens up portals into different dimensions? You're probably thinking that this is all science fiction, but you gotta think outside the box and have no restrictions. Alternate realities and parallel dimensions. Okay, I get some of your apprehensions. Could this all be a spiritual evolution? Cause the human race has grown tired of this toxic pollution. Mandela effect in the house. Crazy. Some people, they just don't understand. That's just the way it is. You know? Stay strong, my friends. That's just the way it is. Dolly has no braces? Are you serious? Good lord. Joel Osteen. So what the heck happened to the owl? Oh my gosh. Oh, this is definitely the Twilight Zone. This is crazy.
Oh yeah. This really is crazy. Hi everyone, it's AJ, the Rippin' Rabbit. Are you enjoying Jerry Hicks and the Darkwolf's Den Show on a Thursday night? If you've enjoyed dark fairy tales up to this point, please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell. You'll get our notifications every time we go live. We're here every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, bringing you the very best of Common Sense Radio, the Rippin' Rabbit Hole. And Jerry is now officially on Wednesday and Thursday nights. My top hat's off to Jerry for increasing his broadcast workload to 2 nights a week. I take my top hats off to you, sir. Dark fairy tales, I am enjoying this far, and I can't wait to see where you take us in the second part of the program. I'll be back again tomorrow night with the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show, a tour through haunted hotels across the world. That's tomorrow night, Friday, October 16th, my father's birthday, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Then Saturday night, October 17th, come along with me as we journey through graveyards and cemeteries. Do you have a phobia of graveyards or cemeteries? Tune in Saturday night, October 17th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, and find out. Then we'll end out this great weekend together Sunday night as we journey into the woods. Now, I'm going to let your mind wander on exactly what that subject is going to be about and what it means, but join me Sunday, October 18th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as we dive through the rabbit hole into the woods. It's going to be a fantastic Spooktober weekend for sure, and I look forward to spending it with you. If you haven't done so already, please make your way on over to rippinrabbithole.com. There you'll find a lot of really great features like the community-generated press and rabbit hole groups. Juanito, 1975, who just did that fantastic Mandela Effect rap, runs a lucid dream group over there, as well as Mandela Effects from Moneybags 73, Jerry Hicks and the Darkwolf's Den Show with his own group, as well as the imec.world group. So there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of things, a lot of rabbit holes for you to explore over there at rippinrabbithole.com. And of course, the Backstage 24/7 Lounge, the coolest place ever. We're going to be back to Jerry Hicks and the Darkwolf's Den on an all-new Thursday night. Howl, the animals of radio. Jerry Hicks has a lot more to come on tonight's episode of the Darkwolf's Den Show. You're listening to the very best of Common Sense Radio, the Rippin' Rabbit Hole. Stick around. Are you ready for the ultimate Halloween experience? This year, with all the social distancing taking place, Halloween, contrary to popular belief, has not been canceled. I repeat, Halloween has not been canceled. The Rippin' Rabbit Hole is proud to sponsor a unique virtual Halloween event taking place October 15th through the 31st exclusively at ourtrickortreat.com. That's O-U-R, trickortreat.com. Sign up and knock on virtual doors for 17 days straight to win a variety of prizes from national, state, and local sponsors. Check out ourtrickortreat.com for the ultimate Halloween experience this year.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Darkwolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, and I am the Dark Wolf. And welcome back to the second half of this episode of the Darkwolf's Den Show. That's right, whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Tonight, Jerry and I are discussing dark fairy tales. That's right. In the first half, we went over some very disturbing nursery rhymes. We've covered Little Red Riding Hood and the many interpretations of that one. But now we're going to cover 20 more dark and disturbing fairy tale meanings. Are you ready for this, Jerry? I don't think I am ever gonna be ready to have my childhood ruined, but with that said, let's do it. You keep stealing AJ's taglines, you ain't gonna have very many fairy tale endings left. Speaking of fairy tale endings, let us get this show back on the road, shall we? Ladies and gentlemen, here are a couple more dark tales for your listening pleasure.
Throughout the years, many fairy tales that we tell today have changed drastically since their first tellings. But what not many people know is how dark the original tales were.
And like Miss Ann Dugan said in the first half, you'll never look at Disney the same again.
The Little Mermaid. In the original tale, the prince falls in love with another princess instead of the Little Mermaid, and she turns the sea foam. But the reason for this is because he doesn't realize that the Little Mermaid is the woman who saved him from his shipwreck.
Of course, we remember in the cartoon that it was very clear who had saved him, that it was the mermaid. But in this telling, the original telling, it's much, much worse.
She gives up her voice to get human legs in order to have him fall in love and marry her, but...
And we all remember that part of the movie where she makes a deal with the sea witch Ursula.
When he announces and finally meets his bride-to-be, he thinks she's the one who saves him from his near-death moment, and is completely in love with her. This breaks the mermaid's heart. In attempts to save their sister, the mermaid sisters cut off all their hair and gave it to the sea witch in return for a magic knife.
So in this telling, the sisters go back and also make a deal with Ursula the Sea Witch. And it only gets worse from here.
The Little Mermaid needed to kill the prince and have his blood drip onto her feet so she could grow back her tail that night and swing back into the ocean.
So she has to kill the prince in order to live. What a heck of a choice this is.
She did not, however, and thus turned to sea foam.
The next time you're walking along the ocean and see the sea foam rise up, you might just wonder, was that once a mermaid?
Cinderella. In the original story of Cinderella, her two stepsisters are desperate to be the prince's bride.
And we all remember the wicked stepmother and wicked stepsisters. But actually Disney spiced it up and cleaned it up a whole lot from the original tale.
I always liked that song from that particular movie. You know, the one, Cindy-Rally, Cindy-Rally.
Oh yeah, the one with the singing mice. That was kind of cute, wasn't it?
But the glass slipper that Cinderella leaves at the ball is made only to fit Cinderella's foot. So, when the prince arrives at the house, the elder stepsister's big toe will not fit, and her mother hands her a knife to cut off the big toe, telling her that when she is queen, there will be no need to go anywhere on foot.
I don't believe that I would cut off any body part regardless of the supposed reward involved.
When the prince takes her away, he realizes there's blood gushing from her foot, and returns, and it's the second sister's turn.
Oh, that's horrible. Cut off her own toe only to find out that it didn't even work and she was returned without a toe. That's a horrible karmic twist, wouldn't you say?
And she can get her toes in, but not a heel. So the mother, once again, gives her a knife and tells her to cut it off, saying the same as before.
Perhaps this sister will be able to hide it a little bit better and get away with cutting her heel off.
He is tricked once more, only to return the sister again.
Nope, yet again, she has injured herself for no reason whatsoever.
Finally, Cinderella is brought out from the kitchen and is fitted with her golden shoe and is taken away.
And that mentioned a golden shoe. I actually remember it being a jeweled slipper, right? Don't you? I doubt that's a Mandela effect. That is more likely an original telling of this tale.
Snow White. Looking glass on the wall, who in the land is the fairest of all?
For those who did not catch that, Jerry, would you like to translate what that would translate into in modern day speak?
Thank you, DW. How'd you know that I would want to whack at that, right? Looking glass on the wall. For those that don't know, let me retranslate that to mirror, mirror on the wall. That's right. The original translation sounds like it was mirror, mirror on the wall, or looking glass on the wall in this case. Always love when I find Mandela effect residue, as you know, DW. I appreciate you letting me have that.
My pleasure indeed. I also love when we find Mandela effect residue. It's always enjoyable, my friend. But we're not here to discuss Mandela effect tonight, of course. We're here to discuss these incredibly dark fairy tales.
In the classic Snow White, the evil queen is essentially Snow White's stepmother, and she doesn't want to kill Snow White until the looking glass tells her that she is no longer the fairest in all the land. So, after the huntsman fails to kill Snow White and the looking glass tells her that Snow is hiding out with 7 dwarfs, the evil queen tricks Snow into nearly killing herself 3 times.
How many times do you remember her almost killing herself in this story, Jerry?
I only remember the apple, right? Wasn't she the one that ate the apple, Snow White?
Yes, I only remember the one myself.
The first was by lacing her bodice too tightly. The second was by combing her hair with a poisoned brush. And finally, the third one is with the poisoned apple.
So yes, the poisoned apple is definitely still in there, but there's 2 more that have been added. A poisoned hairbrush, and almost killing herself lacing up a piece of clothing.
Each time, dwarves have to find her to save her from her near death, except for the last one. That is when Prince Charming comes out of the woods and asks to take her beautiful casket made out of glass and wood, because he had fallen in love with her dead body. Not even joking on that one.
And that adds a seasonally fitting necrophilic twist to things, doesn't it?
No true love kiss, but his people drop the casket, dislodging the piece of apple stuck in Snow White's throat, and she comes back to life to marry the prince.
The weirdest version of the Heimlich maneuver that I have ever heard of.
In the end, the evil queen goes to the marriage and is forced to wear iron shoes that were placed in the fire and dance until she dies.
Even the end of this tale is incredibly disturbing. The witch gets her just desserts in the end. But is it really that good of a tale, with all the darkness and death involved in it? Remember, we learned this as a sweet children's childhood Disney movie. Turns out the original is a lot darker than Disney showed us.
Rapunzel. In one rendition of the classic tale of the long-haired girl, she's not a princess. A child of 2 people who longed and longed to have a child but could not. These people lived next door to an enchantress, and this enchantress's garden was this rampion, which is a type of vegetable that Rapunzel gets her name from. Her father steals the root from the enchantress's garden for his wife because she so desperately wanted it. The enchantress was angry to find this out, and in the end told them that she would take their first child as payment for the vegetable. Up the tower is where Rapunzel lived when her prince found her and would visit her frequently. They fell in love, but Rapunzel didn't know how to get down, so they made a plan to make a silk rope.
And a silk rope, that's different than the original tale, right, DW? Because she used, her hair, right, in the original tale?
Yes, Rapunzel, let down your hair. That is right, Jerry.
Rapunzel let it slip that the prince weighed less than the enchantress, so she cut off Rapunzel's long braids and sent her away to the desert.
Well, apparently the enchantress was a little bit offended by her weight.
Darkwolf, that is so wrong.
What? I'm not the one that said it. The one in the story said it. I'm just translating it.
When the prince came up with a ladder, he found the enchantress, and before she could do anything to him, he jumped from the tower.
Once again, I don't remember this part in the story.
He managed to survive, but was blinded because he landed in thorns.
Ouch! That sounds incredibly painful, even for a wolf.
But you have fur.
I don't have any more fur on my eyeballs than you do, and you know it.
Okay, fair point.
He wandered into the same desert where Rapunzel was and found that she had twins. When Rapunzel cried into his eyes, he was able to see once more, and they were able to travel back to his kingdom with the 2 kids.
See, that has a happy ending, right?
Yeah, but where did the 2 kids come from?
Okay, a semi-happy ending.
Definitely a happier ending than our next story.
Sleeping Beauty. In the older tale of Sleeping Beauty, the princess is set to have her finger pricked by a spindle and die on her 15th birthday, all because Maleficent didn't get an invite to the party.
Now that is an incredibly dark temper tantrum to throw, is it not? You didn't invite me to the party, so your child will only live to the age of 15. Already it's dark, and once again, that's only on the surface.
But what you might not have known was that the prince didn't just kiss her awake.
Oh no, something tells me this is about to go back into that land of disturbing again.
Instead, he fell so helplessly in love with her comatose body that he then decided to have his way with her.
And this is the second time that this has come up, that the person has had their way with the comatose body of the victim, for lack of better words. Once again, this reminds me of the Little Red Riding Hood, does it not?
Yes, there definitely is some themes that seem to be repeated across some of these that are incredibly dark and disturbing.
Asleep or not. And that in turn caused her to become pregnant with, again, twins. They must have loved the idea of twins back then.
Yet again, another thing that seems to pop up across these different stories. And I can't help but wonder if it doesn't go along with the idea of Cain and Abel, the twins of old, and if it's kind of referencing that, one good, one bad, perhaps an equivalent balance, if you will.
This, of course, is while she's still asleep, and it's not until one of the babies, while looking for a breast for milk, sucks on her finger, awakens the princess, dislodging the piece of flax fiber that she had pricked her finger on.
And yet again, just like the last tale, the magical piece that is causing the issue is accidentally removed in this case. Just once again, like the last story, it was not purposely removed at all.
Hansel and Gretel.
Now this one here was always very disturbing on the surface to me also, so I can only imagine the dark origins behind it.
The story that we all know is pretty gruesome enough, about two kids lost in the woods who find a witch's house. Then the witch tries to eat them, and in turn they shove her into a stove and run away. Well, in the French original, The Lost Children, their parents didn't actually want them because they were greedy, and have to decide to lose their own children in the forest.
These guys definitely win the award for worst parents ever.
And you know, DW, it really makes these stories disturbing when they involve children, right? That takes it to a whole new level of disturbing.
Yes, Jerry, I definitely agree. When you involve children into some dark tales like this, it does make it that much worse, does it not?
They find a red house, and a woman there lets them both in, but tells them they need to be quiet or else her husband will eat them. It ends up that her husband is the devil and found the children.
The husband is a new addition to me with this tale, let alone him being the devil himself. Did you know that the devil was mentioned originally in this fairy tale?
He builds a sawhorse to bleed the children on, but they pretended not to know how to get on it. So when the devil's wife got in it, the boy slit her throat and took the devil's money and ran.
Wow, that got incredibly dark, incredibly quick. Holy cow.
They crossed the river, which the devil couldn't do, and went back home to take care of their parents, despite them leaving them in the woods to die.
But of course, the kids did not know that the parents had left them to die in the woods, right? They probably thought that they just merely did get lost, right? Yet another very dark and disturbing fairy tale. Just like the Sleepy Hollow. That's what that reminds me of, with the devil not being able to cross the river. Like the Headless Horseman, right? Unable to cross the bridge. Perhaps there's a connection there. That is yet another, of course, dark Halloween tale.
Three Little Pigs. In this well-known classic, the three little pigs build their houses out of various materials: straw, stick, and brick. We all know that it ends up with the brick house that stands up to the big bad wolves. I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow the house down line.
Okay, so far it seems quite tame.
And in the classic story, we know he opts for going down the chimney and burns his butt and runs out of the scene again.
Although a little dark on the surface, it again seems quite tame so far.
But in the original story, the final pig decides that's not going to be enough. Instead, when the wolf decides to come down the chimney, he has a pot of boiling water waiting for him. And once the wolf is inside of it, he shuts the lid and cooks the wolf. Once dead, they all eat him.
There you go, DW. What do you think of that one? I gotta say, I'm not that much of a fan of that ending at all. Those little pigs ate the wolf. That did get quite disturbing very quickly, did it not?
The Pied Piper. In the original tale of the Pied Piper, there was a village overrun with rats. A man arrives dressed in the clothes of a pied and offers to rid the town of the vermin. The villagers agree to pay a vast sum of money if the Pied Piper can do so, and he does. He plays music on his pipe which draws out all the rats, and when he returns for the payment, the villagers won't cough up, so the Pied Piper decides to rid the town of children as well. In most modern variants, the Pied Piper draws the children to a cave, where the townsfolk finally agree to pay up. Then he sends them back.
Once again, as we've learned across this episode already, if it's dark on the surface, then it's incredibly dark underneath. What is the actual meaning of this fairy tale?
In the original, however, the Pied Piper leads the children to a river where they all drown, except for a lame boy who couldn't keep up.
And here you thought these were all just moral tales, right? He drowned the children. That is disturbing and dark. And yet these are tales, once again, that we tell our kids, right? Really makes you think twice before you tell another fairy tale to your child, doesn't it?
Beauty and the Beast. The original tale is titled Little Broomstick.
One of my favorite Disney movies indeed. I love watching all the different furniture that comes to life and dances around and talks. That is such a credible movie, right? Well, actually the story is much, much worse.
In the original story, Belle has two older, spoiled sisters and a father whom is a merchant. On one of his trips, he asks his daughters what they would like from his trip. The older siblings ask for a necklace and earrings, while Belle simply asks for nothing. But as her father insists, she asks for 3 roses on a single stem.
Of course, something that is not supposed to exist to begin with, so it would be very hard to find, right?
On his journey, the father finds the first 2 gifts easily, but ends up in a large garden and finds the roses. Upon taking them, he runs into the hideous beast. He begs for the beast to let him go, for he was only getting the roses for his daughter. The beast lets the fathers go on the condition that he allows the merchant father to give up his daughter as his wife in a few months' time.
Of course, this is already much different than the original tale that we all know. Because in the original tale, the beast was cursed by a witch that would not be allowed to stay in his castle, right? It had nothing to do with the Garden of Roses. And also remember, the rose in the story that we know would die if Belle did not fall in love with the beast. It was supposed to be a choice of Belle's. Yet we find in this story that that is not the case at all.
Time comes, and Belle ends up being taken to the castle as the beast's companion. They don't really talk much, but they do sleep together. First, it is only side by side, Then slowly he leaves her a kiss, until she can no longer sleep without him by her side. When she sees that he looks as if he is dead in the courtyard, and she weeps over his lifeless body, he returns to his normal self. His father had a sorceress transform him into a hideous beast when he would not marry someone he did not love.
Once again, there's a difference in the original story, because as I mentioned a moment ago, the original curse was from a woman who was not allowed to stay in the castle with the beast, or the prince that would become the beast. And this telling is because he would not marry someone that he did not love. It definitely changes the meaning of the entire story, doesn't it?
And the only way to break the curse was to have someone love him as an ugly beast. The story, however, does not end here, for Belle wants to bring her sisters and father to come live with her after she marries the beast turned prince. But the sisters, being completely jealous of her, drown her in a bathtub.
Wow, once again, incredibly quick, it takes a very dark turn.
And in another plot twist, the same sorceress brings Belle back to life and tells her the only way to punish the sisters properly is to turn them into stone columns, and if a man can ever fall in love with them, then they will return back to normal.
Well, from what we've heard of the princes that fall in love with comatose bodies, I guess nothing is out of the question, is it? But we had resurrection in that particular story, another part that I do not remember. Beauty and the Beast is definitely one that becomes very disturbing as you look into the darker, deeper meanings and origins behind it. So what do you think so far, Jerry? Are you disturbed yet?
DW, I am way past disturbed. You have absolutely ruined nursery rhymes for me. You've ruined most of the fairy tales that I grew up with. I think I may actually need therapy after this episode. What do you guys out in the audience think? Think this is disturbing enough you might need therapy afterwards?
Maybe those in the VIP backstage lounge will give you some good therapy, right? You guys can always join us back there after the episode, and we can discuss these further. But don't worry, we're not done yet. We have yet another list of dark fairy tales to go through. You think you can handle a little bit more, Jerry?
I don't know. By the end of this, I might end up over in the corner just shivering and rocking, right?
Let us hope that that is not the case. And let's hope we haven't done that to our audience yet, because we have yet another dark tale to go through.
Aladdin.
Ah, yes, Aladdin. The tale of the street rat turned prince thanks to the magic genie. Another great Disney film from the 90s. One that's the lovable, cherishable story, right?
We all know him as a lovable street rat. However, in the original version of the tale, Aladdin is far from lovable. Rather, he is an impetuous, lazy, and stupid boy who refuses to make anything of himself.
And I'm sure we all know somebody like this in our lives that we can relate this character to.
To the point that, at the beginning of the story, his father literally dies of disappointment.
You have to be pretty bad if you kill somebody from being completely disappointed in you.
Then, when Aladdin finds his genies and achieves some measure of success, he believes himself worthy of the Sultan's daughter.
And genies in this case, of course, means the jinn, which we've discussed on earlier episodes, I do believe. And if not, then we will definitely be discussing it in the future.
Unfortunately, the princess is already betrothed to another. But this is no worry for Aladdin. No, he chooses to kidnap the princess on the night of her wedding, forces her to spend the night with him, and sends her fiancé off to be tortured by Aladdin's jinn
In this telling, Aladdin sounds more like the villain than he does the hero.
Thereby preventing the princess from consummating her marriage. He does this long enough that her fiancé believes the marriage is cursed and abandons her, at which point Aladdin steals her for himself.
And you would think boy gets the girl, end of story, right? However, that is not the end of this tale.
Aladdin eventually marries the princess and outbuilds the Sultan's palace to prove his right to rule the throne, until the evil sorcerer decides to have his revenge on Aladdin, steals the genie's lamp, and teleports Aladdin's palace, princess and all, into the desert. Aladdin despairs and nearly commits suicide by jumping into a river, before remembering he has a tiny jinn in a ring on his finger.
And once again, these jinn come into play that were not a part of the story that we learned through Disney, of course.
Using the jinn, he finds his palace, reaches the princess, and forces her to first seduce the sorcerer, and then to murder him. Our hero, everybody.
It sounds like Aladdin was more of an anti-hero than a regular hero, wouldn't you say? And having the evil sorcerer killed. Once again, a dark ending to this well-known fairy tale. Do you guys remember the tale of the princess and the frog?
In some versions of The Frog Prince, the prince doesn't return to form after the princess kisses him, or he spends a few nights on a pillow. No, instead the princess has to cause him physical harm.
Of course, the classic fairy tale trope of kissing the frog to turn him into a prince. Well, it turns out it isn't such a lovely, sweet little tale after all.
In one, she throws him as hard as she possibly can against the wall.
Wow, isn't that animal abuse?
In another, she burns him to a crisp.
You know, I don't mind some fried frog legs every now and again.
And in another, she literally chops his head off.
Yeah, I got nothing on that one.
And that's what breaks the spell. Nothing like being decapitated by your future wife.
So it seems that the tale of the princess and the frog once again is much darker than the one that we grew up learning about.
The story of Rumpelstiltskin is fairly well known. A man brags about his daughter's ability to weave, claiming she's so good that she can turn straw to gold.
The Rumpelstiltskin story indeed gets very, very dark and goes to some interesting places.
A king hears about this and forces her to prove her abilities under penalty of death, and an imp comes to save her. On the third night, he asks her something in return, and she has nothing to offer him. "Worry not, my dear," he says. "Just give me your firstborn child."
And this is yet another trope that we find coming up in a lot of the fairy tales, is taking the firstborn child of the, quote, victim of the tale.
The girl agrees, the room is turned to gold, and the king marries her. Of course, not long after getting married, she has a son, and the imp comes to take the child. She begs for a second chance and tells her that he will only give the child back if she discovers his name.
So far, this sounds like the classic story that we all know so well.
Lo and behold, the girl does discover his name, and when he comes back to collect the child, she tells him that it's Rumpelstiltskin. Infuriated, the little imp stamps his foot so hard he lodges it into the ground, and in his fury, commits suicide by grabbing his left leg and ripping himself in half.
That, once again, is a twist ending that I do not remember being taught as a child. This does have a happy ending, of course, for the queen in this case, the one that would have lost her child. So it's not quite as dark as some. But an imp tearing itself in half isn't exactly sunshine and rainbows either.
Yeah. Undine is a story about a beautiful maiden who lives by the seaside and the knight who falls in love with her.
And I must confess I am not as familiar with this particular tale.
Sounds like your standard fairy tale, right? There's just one problem. The maiden doesn't have a soul. People today might know Undine as a character from the popular video game Undertale. But back in the early 1800s, Undine was one of the creepiest German fairy tales around.
And as you guys know, earlier we covered Hansel and Gretel, which is also a German fairy tale. The German tales do tend to get very disturbing.
The story of Undine starts off with a fisherman, his wife, and their young daughter. One day, the daughter slips from the mother's grasp and drowns in the lake.
Oh no. Like I said, I don't know this tale at all, but if we've learned anything so far, like I said earlier, if it's dark on the outer layer, then it's going to be incredibly disturbing on the deeper layers, right, DW? That seems to be the trend so far tonight, huh? Let us see if that continues.
The fisherman and his wife mourn until later that day, when Undine arrives at their cottage, blonde hair dripping with water. The fisherman decides to raise her as his own and takes the silent, well-behaved child to be baptized, only for her to start screaming as soon as the ceremony is over. The ceremony causes Undine to grow willful and wild, but despite this, the family grows together happily. One day, a knight comes to the little cottage in the forest and falls in love with Undine, despite the fact that her lack of soul renders her terribly selfish and incapable of empathy.
So already we know that he cannot love her back. This is not going to end well, Jerry. Something tells me that's going to be an understatement, Darkwolf. Something tells me you may be right. Let us find out.
Upon a priest's visit to the cottage, Undine marries the knight. He promises to love her forever, and on her wedding day, Undine is granted a soul by God.
Okay, DW, maybe this isn't gonna turn out so bad after all. She's got a soul now, right? Maybe.
Undine and her knight return to the city, only to discover there was another lady close to her knight before this journey, a woman named Batalda. Despite Batalda's love for the knight, she and Undine become good friends, at first. But soon Batalda learns the truth about Undine.
And of course, another woman in the picture is never a good sign.
That she is a water spirit, given a soul by love, and grows cold to her. And as Batalda grows cold to her, she convinces the knight to grow suspicious of his wife as well. Undine despairs, as over time she watches the love leave her knight's eyes, and her knight leave her side for Batalda's.
It sounds like you might be right, Jerry. This might get disturbing after all.
Finally, the day comes that Batalda, Undine, and her knight are all traveling by the waterside. Batalda's necklace, given to her by the knight, is stolen by a mischievous water spirit. She and the knight are incensed and blame Undine, who dips her hand into the water and pulls out a different necklace, one much fairer than before. But her husband sees this necklace as yet more proof of her strangeness, and finally shouts, "You are a witch. Go, and trouble us no more."
So far, we have a water spirit who had fallen in love and was given a soul by the power of love, only to have that love stripped away from her and ripped away from her life. Then when she does something special for these people that really meant something to her, they now turn her away and call her names and call her a witch. Oh yes, the revenge here's definitely gonna be dark indeed.
Undine bursts into tears as she disappears beneath the surface of the river, never again to return to land. It does not take long for the knight to forget Undine and instead marry Batalda. And on that night, a ghostly figure emerges from their castle well and comes upon the knight. He looks upon the figure, who looks remarkably similar to Undine. "I have come for you, and you must die," she says to him. And so he does, for he had broken his promise to her, and he had to pay the price.
I told you that was gonna have a bad ending somehow, or it wouldn't be on this list. Yes, indeed. It does look like you were right, Jerry. That did have a very dark ending, for he paid the price for his lies and his treachery, did he not? And a price deeply to pay indeed that was. For to pay with your own life is the ultimate price indeed. Yet again, we find morals in here, but not the morals that we thought we would be learning when we were children. Oh no, the morals in here are very much more adult-oriented indeed.
A beautiful young woman suddenly comes to the attention of a creepy old murderer. A love story for the ages, right?
Oh, definitely. Everyone's heard the story about the murderer and the person that falls in love with them, right? Yeah, that's your classic love story, yeah.
Bluebeard is the tale of an ugly old man with, well, a blue beard.
At least he did have a blue beard. At least it wasn't like a purple beard and they called him Bluebeard, right? Or like an orange beard and they called it... I don't know, I'm just being silly now.
In fact, he is so ugly that none of the girls in the village want to marry him.
It sounds like he had what they call a face for radio. It's too bad radio wasn't a thing in his time, huh?
Hey, DW?
Yes, Jerry.
You do realize you're on radio right now, right?
Yes, I do. Why? What do you ask?
Well, you can't exactly go walking around in public in your full wolf form now, can you? So some would say you've got a face for radio, would they not?
Oh, you're a funny guy, Jerry. I hope Bluebeard, our character here, was a funny guy, because apparently his looks barred him from getting any dates in this story, right?
A husband with a blue beard? Perish the thought. Plus, there's the troubling fact that Bluebeard has married before, but all of his previous wives have gone mysteriously missing.
Well, that definitely is not a good track record, is it?
Determined to get his bride, Bluebeard throws her family and friends a lavish party. See, despite being ugly, Bluebeard is incredibly rich. That wealth was all Our Lady needed to rethink the matter.
Isn't it funny how a monetary gain can change one's mind so quickly?
After all, his beard wasn't that blue. In a short time, they were married. Then, one day, Bluebeard must go out of town on a business trip. He gives his wife the keys to all the doors in the house, but orders her never to go to the cellar.
I don't know about you, but that would be the first place that I would look. What about you, Jerry? He handed you all the keys and told you, go anywhere but the cellar. Would you do it?
No, I would completely respect the privacy and do as I would ask. I gotta say, I'm a pretty respectful person.
Are you kidding? The moment his back was turned around, I would be racing to that cellar to figure out exactly what was in there. I'm a curious wolf indeed.
Well, let's put it to the audience then. What do you think, guys? Put a 1 in the chat room over there if you would respect and not go anywhere near the cellar, if you would just do as he asked. Or put a 2 in the chat room if you would not waste time to get over there and find out exactly what is behind door number 3, right? What do you guys think? 1s or 2s? What do you think?
I know, like I said, I would be respectful. Darkwolf sounds like he'd be a little more curious. What would you guys do?
Promising the most terrible of punishments would await her if she did. Then he left. Of course, she couldn't resist the siren song of what lay beyond the cellar door. So, leaving her self-preservation behind, she crept down the cellar and opened the door to a pitch-black room.
How many of you said that you would follow me down the stairs to the cellar? For those that did, let's find out what our character finds down there.
At first, she couldn't see anything, but then, slowly, her eyes adjusted. There, in the cellar full of congealed blood, lay the rotting and massacred bodies of Bluebeard's previous wives.
Oh, this has definitely got quickly disturbing.
See, if you would have been respectful and listened, you wouldn't have found a room full of dead bodies.
Yes, but then you wouldn't have the knowledge of what is coming for you, now would you?
I guess that's a fair point.
She was so shocked, she dropped the key, which became covered in blood. But the key was enchanted, and she couldn't rub the blood off. When Bluebeard finally came home and discovers her treachery, he lifts her by the hair and draws his sword, ready to slit her throat, just like every woman who came before her, before getting run clean through by the ladies, previously unmentioned, brothers.
So it sounds like she narrowly escaped this fate. But Bluebeard paid the price again for his evil deeds, didn't he?
In this lesser-known Brothers Grimm tale, the three army surgeons love to boast about how they're the best surgeons in the world everywhere they go.
And once again, this is one that I am currently unfamiliar with. What about you, Jerry?
No, I gotta say I'm pretty unfamiliar with this one too. Sounds like something else that would come out of Germany though, doesn't it?
Indeed it does. Let us take a listen and find out what we have here.
One night, an innkeeper dares them to prove it. They bet him that they can cut off parts of their own body and reattach them the next morning, and the innkeeper agrees.
And already we've gone to an incredibly dark place, and we're only beginning this story. Oh my.
The first surgeon cuts off his hands. The second surgeon scrapes out his eyes. And the third surgeon tears out his own heart.
Well, I'd like to know how the first surgeon is going to reattach his hands without his hands. But the eyeballs, that makes it even worse. You can't even see to attach them. And the heart, well, that ends it all, doesn't it? These must be talented surgeons indeed.
Having done this, all three rub a secret magic salve on their bodies that will enable their organs to be reattached with no trouble the next morning.
Again, I would love to know how the guy without the hands on anymore rubbed this salve all over his body.
Are you really sure you want the answer to that question?
Fair point.
The heart, eyes, and hands are given to the servant girl for safekeeping. Unfortunately, the servant girl has a lover. While she was meant to keep watch over the organs, her lover visited and distracted her. In this time, the local inn cat stole away the organs and devoured them. Horrified, the servant girl tries to find a way to fix the mistake she made. She takes the heart of a pig she butchered earlier in the day, cuts the hands off a thief's corpse, and tears out the cat's eyes and passes them off as the surgeon's originals.
Wow! That just went from twisted to disturbing really quickly.
I couldn't have said it better, DW.
The next morning, the three surgeons reattach their various organs. The innkeeper is incredibly impressed, and the three surgeons go on their way. But the surgeon with the pig's heart couldn't follow his friends, for every time they looked the other way, he was off rooting in the dirt as a pig would.
Hey, Jerry,
You remember that phenomenon that you talked about where taking on people's body parts actually tends to take on their personalities? You remember talking about that on an episode? Oh yeah, you're right, I do. That does sound a lot like those stories, doesn't it? I wonder if that's where they got the inspiration for this tale, huh? Perhaps even then they were noticing oddities when different things would occur.
The surgeon with the cat's eyes quickly found that he could not truly see and had to be led around by his friends. The last surgeon stopped at the bar for a rest and found his hands acting of their own accord and stealing things out of people's pockets. Enraged, they go back to the inn, only to discover their organs are long and forever gone. In return for this horror, they threaten to burn the damned place down. But no matter what, they can't do anything to return to the way they were originally, and are forced to be at the mercy of their new organs for the rest of their lives.
Once again, these are meant as fairy tales for children, but as we learned in the first half, these fairy tales weren't actually meant for children, not all of them. As we've learned, they were actually meant for adults and aristocrats. Even though today we teach them to our children, and we don't even teach them the right way, do we? We teach them as cute little moral stories, and not even the correct morals that the real stories taught. I am sure of one thing, whether it's the paranormal or the dark side of the history of fairy tales. In the end, ladies and gentlemen, you be the judge. That's right. Oh, yeah. Dark Wolf, ladies and gentlemen, there he is. What do you guys think? Think we should let him host the rest of the month? I think he did a pretty good job. Did you enjoy doing that, Dark Wolf? I have had an absolute blast hosting so far, and I very much appreciate you letting me host this last couple of shows, Jerry. You gonna let me do it the rest of the month? Were you kidding when you said that? I will make you a deal. I will let you host up to the last show of the month, and then I'll take over for the Halloween party. How does that sound? That sounds like a good deal to me. And you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. DW will be hosting for the rest of the month. Congratulations, DW. I hope you keep doing as wonderful of a job as you've done so far. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for tonight's episode of the Darkwolf's Den Show. We've got to close it out. That's right. Spooktober 15th, 2020 has come to an end with the dark fairy tales. But don't you worry, the den may be closing, but the weekend fun is only just begun. That's right. Make sure you guys come back Friday through Sunday for AJ the Rippin' Rabbit's Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show. That's right. I happen to know that on Friday night he's going to be talking about haunted hotels. That's right. Could you imagine checking into a hotel or a hotel room anyway that is already taken by a spirit that you cannot see? Not all of them are nice enough to share the room quietly. He'll be discussing that on Friday night. Then on Saturday night, our favorite place to go when we die. Ladies and gentlemen, people have been dying to get into this place for years. That's right, graveyards. He's going to be talking about those spooky, dark places where we bury our dead. Then on Sunday, we're going to take a trip into the woods, into one of my favorite places, yet a place full of darkness and creepy characters. A lot of cryptids are spotted in the woods. A lot of funny, crazy, and spooky activity has been spotted in the woods. and that's what AJ will be discussing on Sunday. And that'll round out this weekend of fun-filled topics for Spooktober. That's right, at least this Spooktober weekend. We've got a half a month to go, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. I advise you heavily to go over to the ripinrabbithole.com. That is RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. I kind of need you guys' help tonight. This show has really made me need some therapy, and I need you guys back in the VIP lounge to help me work through some of these issues that Dark Wolf has caused this evening, and maybe I can help you work through some he may have caused in you too, because he has definitely demolished my childhood tonight. If you want to get to that VIP lounge and hang out with us, just go on over to the RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. That's the ripinrabbithole.com. Select the Backstage 24/7 Lounge. That's right. Scroll about halfway down that page. Select the VIP entrance. You're going to have to allow your camera and microphone, but you can turn that off the moment you get inside and just use text chat. There's a couple that hang out every night back there, and they do just that. And it's fun having everybody back there to hang out and discuss, because for you guys, the conversation's in here, but for the Rippin' Rabbits, the conversation has only just begun. That's right. I also urge you to scroll down to the bottom of each and every page and select that red record button. You only got to do it once. You ain't got to do it on every page. But select that red record button and send us 30 seconds of audio here in the studio, and we'll get it on the radio for you. That's right. You heard the shout outs at the beginning from Miss Cynthia Sue Larson and Meta. That's right. You can have your spot there too. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for us tonight here in the Den. We'd like to thank everybody involved in making this show as amazing as it is. And ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Rippin' Common Sense Radio and AJ the Rippin' Rabbit and everybody in the network, we thank you for being here. And remember always, stay awake, but dare to dream. Bye, everybody. Good night, everybody. Oh, yeah.
Ow! The animals of radio. That howl used to mean the start of the weekend. But guess what? Now, on a Thursday night, when you hear that howl, that means your weekend is well underway. Jerry is here every Wednesday and Thursday nights, and we bring you the very best of Common Sense Radio every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. The Rippin' Rabbit Hole. It's a lot of fun. I'm so excited to have Jerry on now Wednesdays and Thursday nights. Number one, it takes a huge load off of me. And number two, he's just awesome to listen to. If you enjoyed tonight's show, Dark Fairy Tales of the Darkwolf's Den Show, please, if you haven't done so already, please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell before you leave. It means so much to us. And if you haven't done so already, I encourage you to visit us over at the ripinrabbithole.com. Join the Backstage 24/7 VIP chat lounge, where the conversation continues after the show. I'm looking forward to meeting up with Jerry there in just a few moments. If you're going to be tuning in for the rest of October, keep in mind it's our Spooktober month. All shows are Halloween themed. I'll be back again tomorrow night, Friday night, with a look at haunted houses. Then Saturday we'll tool through the cemeteries and graveyards in a phobia-based graveyard show. And then Sunday we'll end out the weekend together right as we head through the rabbit hole and into the woods. I'm going to let you stew on exactly what you think that means. It's a lot of fun here at the Rippin' Rabbit Hole. If you haven't done so already, I strongly encourage you to visit us there in the VIP chat lounge, where you can participate, where the conversation continues after the show. Jerry is now on every Wednesday and Thursday nights, a signature show here at the Rippin' Rabbit Hole. We're excited and honored, and I take my top hats off to you, sir, for adding another night to your schedule. Before you know it, you'll be up to 4 nights a week and you'll have your own station. Let's hope that doesn't happen, huh? Either way, I look forward to spending the rest of the weekend together with you. I'm AJ the Rippin' Rabbit, wherever you are. Good morning, good evening, or good day, whatever the case may be. Until we meet again, take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.
But the truth is that he caught her down in Georgetown with a Spaniard who had left his wife behind.
Are you ready for the ultimate Halloween experience? This year, with all the social distancing taking place, Halloween, contrary to popular belief, has not been canceled. I repeat, Halloween has not been canceled. The Rippin' Rabbit Hole is proud to sponsor a unique virtual Halloween event taking place October 15th through the 31st exclusively at ourtrickortreat.com. That's O-U-R, trickortreat.com. Sign up and knock on virtual doors for 17 days straight to win a variety of prizes from national, state, and local sponsors. Check out ourtrickortreat.com for the ultimate Halloween experience this year.
I'm lost and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever Oh, what a widow, a crystal spider. When the grass is cool, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the rise and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a crystal spider. When the grass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion?